The movie starts with Carl rejecting a call from his best friend, Peter. He puts up excuses to avoid his invitation to go out for drinks, saying he's too busy with work, when in reality he's choosing a movie to rent. His friend is used to his lies and can see through them. He's actually gone to pick him up at the video store. He reluctantly goes with him to their usual bar. Peter's fiancée, Lucy, is there, and they announce they're engaged. Carl is unamused, but surprised, since they have only been dating for a few months. Peter corrects him, telling him they've been together for 2 years now. They invite him to their engagement party. Carl avoids saying yes by giving an unclear answer. He suddenly looks over at the bar and discovers his ex-wife is there, with another man, flirting openly. He gets upset, telling his friends that's what happens when he agrees to go out. He gets up to leave. His friends stop him and tell him he should get over it. It's been 3 years, and he can't avoid her forever. He denies the reason for his leaving being Stephanie, although everyone knows he's lying. It's even more obvious when she goes over to Carl, accompanied, beginning a very awkward encounter that ends up with Carl knocking a waitress tray and slipping onto the floor. The whole bar pities him. Next morning, depressed, he leaves his house for work. Nothing in his life seems to interest him. His elderly neighbor, Tilly, insistently invites him to breakfast. He declines all of her advances. Outside a coffee shop, he rejects the guy who's always handing out pamphlets. At work, he goes through his emails, replying no to all of them. His hyperactive, cheerful boss, Norman, goes over to speak to him and informs him he's not getting a promotion. Carl is frustrated as he's been working at the bank longer than the selected colleague. His boss then invites him to a costume party, which he rejects. Carl works in a bank, approving or declining loans. He rejects applicant after applicant. At lunch break, he runs into an old friend, Nick, who drags him into a painful catch-up. It's been 5 years since they saw each other. Carl's stuck in the same job he despises, and he's lost the love of his life. Although, as always, he's not honest about any of this. He puts up excuses for his stagnation. Meanwhile, his friend's life has changed completely. He's traveled the world, had amazing experiences. He asks if he wants to know his secret. Carl doesn't, but his friend shows him anyways, a pamphlet of a program called Yes Man. Carl says he doesn't need it, he's fine. But Nick leaves it to him anyway, saying fine is BS. In a short demonstration of what the program will bring, his friend ends up throwing a rock at the bank, breaking a window, and being chased away by security, ecstatic. He rejects more phone calls, ignores an orange vendor, and ignores the pamphlet. He calls his ex-wife, who is rude to him. He then goes to the movie rental again, bored and numb. As he's watching a horror movie, annoyed and unsympathetic towards the victims, Peter is at his apartment door. Carl once more is going to make up a reason for not answering his calls, but Peter doesn't believe him. We find out Carl missed his best friend's engagement party that night. Carl plays dumb and apologizes, giving empty promises of making it up to Peter. He starts to wallow in self-pity, talking badly about marriage, but his friend is sick of him. Not everything's about Carl. Tonight was about people in his life, and he's continually failing them. He's at a point wherein if he doesn't change, he's going to end up alone. The next scene, their friends come into their apartment and find him lifeless on his couch, but they don't care. Fortunately, Carl wakes up from the nightmare, remorseful and sad. He finds the Yes Program pamphlet again and decides to check it out. At a packed auditorium, a cheesy presentation starts. Everyone seems invested and moved, but Carl is skeptical. The audience applauds and shouts yes in unison. A man with white hair and white clothes comes onto the stage. It's the creator of the program, Terrence, who is worshipped by everyone in the crowd. Carl's old friend, who's also at the talk, introduces him as a new member of the program, bringing everyone's attention to him. Carl gives his typical, sarcastic answers, and everyone scoffs, knowingly. They've been there. When the host invites him on stage, he says no. Everyone screams and points at him, yelling no man. In cult-like complicity, the host runs up to him, barefoot. He sits very close to him. He sees through him and seems to know his life, declaring him lifeless. According to Terrence, since Carl says no to life, therefore he's not living. He makes excuses to people and to himself. Stuck for years in the same job. Carl has no love in his life, having lost it because his ex couldn't live her life with someone who didn't live theirs. Carl is speechless. The host becomes very invasive with his questions, but Carl eventually lowers his walls. Terrence makes a statement to Carl, as if he were pronouncing a spell. He tells Carl that as soon as he leaves the building that night, every time an opportunity comes, no matter what it is, he will say yes, warning him that if he doesn't say yes, things will get dicey. When asked if he accepts the challenge, Carl is coaxed by everyone to say yes. Terrence grabs him by the head and shakes him violently, forcing him to make him believe in their ideology. Moved, Carl cries and screams the word yes. Once he leaves the seminar, a homeless man asks him for a ride. Nick entices him to say yes, but Carl feels like he's regretting agreeing to the idea already. The man then asks to use his phone, and Carl drives him far away to a park, while listening to the man's loud conversation. However, they end up in the middle of nowhere. The man asks him for a couple of bucks, and he ends up giving him all of his money, after which, the man disappears in the bushes. Carl tries to leave, but realizes he's out of gas, and his phone's battery is drained because of the man he helped. Annoyed, he runs a long way in the middle of the night to a gas station. As he's filling a container with gas, a motorcycle arrives, with a young woman riding it. She's Allison. Out of nowhere, she takes a photo of him. They engage in a lighthearted chat, and she even offers to give him a ride. She turns out to be a speedster and reckless driver, which terrifies him. She even takes a selfie with her big camera, blinding them both with the flash. It's obvious that they're complete opposites. When he's filling up his car, she goes up to him and suddenly kisses him. After that, she leaves, giving him a Polaroid picture she took of them. Carl looks at it and smiles, finally realizing the benefits of the yes philosophy. The next morning, he reads the pamphlet intently. His phone rings, and for the first time he answers it directly. It's his boss and friend, Norman, who asks him to come in on a weekend. He agrees, reluctantly. At work, he goes through his emails, answering yes to every sketchy email that he gets, even one from a website offering to find a Persian wife. A lone applicant arrives, an untalented baker. Even though he doesn't believe in her business, he gives her a loan. He goes up to his boss to bring him cake, who is stoked by his sudden friendliness. The conversation results in Norman telling him that, because Carl's been showing more initiative, he's getting the promotion he had lost before. He's approving loans, being more open to coworkers, and most importantly, he said yes to coming to work that weekend, while the guy who was going to get the promotion said no. That night, he goes out with his friends, Peter and Rooney, to the usual restaurant, and apologizes profusely, recognizing he's been a bad friend. He tells them all about the program. His best friend, Peter, takes advantage of the promise, and opens a tab in Carl's name. Carl has to agree, but he's happy to do so, wanting to make it up to him for missing his engagement party. They get drunk, eat oysters, and have fun like they haven't together in years. Carl has the whole bar cheering for him as he aces a game of Dance Dance Revolution. He gets even wilder as he buys the whole bar drinks, kisses a strange girl, and gets in a fight with the girl's boyfriend. His friends have to carry him out at the end of the night. Carl eventually wakes up on the bathroom floor, and as he remembers the night before, he starts laughing. He comes out of his apartment, and his pushy old neighbor is there again. She asks him to put up some shelves and offers to give him release, unknowingly taking advantage of his promise. When he tries to refuse, he falls down the stairs and almost gets attacked by a dog. He goes back to her apartment, finally agreeing to do what she wants, and unexpectedly, he ends up loving the experience. There's a montage of Carl saying yes and even agreeing to go to one of Norman's themed parties. When he sees advertisements about guitar, flying, and Korean lessons, he participates enthusiastically in all of them. He volunteers at a soup kitchen. He grants a loan to every applicant that comes up to him. He also finally takes a pamphlet from the musician outside the coffee shop and actually attends a session. The gig is almost empty and the band is strange and corny, but fun. The star of the show is actually the motorcycle girl, who sings, dances, and even plays the guitar board. Carl's actually enjoying himself and is mesmerized by her. They meet at the bar, and she recognizes him. They have good banter, and he walks her to her scooter. He's surprised by her doing a bit of everything. She then invites him to a jogging photography class the next morning. Carl sets up his alarm to wake up early, and just as he's going to sleep, he gets a phone call. It's Rooney asking him to go out to a bar. A few hours later, Carl arrives at Allison's class, fueled by Red Bull and fresh off a rave. She's worried if he's able to participate properly in class. However, Carl outruns everyone, taking photographs excitedly, and then passes out on a hill due to a caffeine crash. After a while, the two find time to talk to each other. Allison opens up to him. She's as intrigued and surprised by him as he is by her. She tells him about her past, her views on life. On the other hand, Carl refrains from sharing anything authentic with her. At lunch, Carl tells his best friend about Allison, about how she's bossy, has no clue what she's doing, and doesn't care, which is the complete opposite of him. We also see that the Persian woman he found online is casually sitting with him. His friend expresses concern about the program, as it's not a healthy or normal behavior, and could bring him dangerous consequences. Peter takes advantage of him yet again, forcing him to throw a bridal shower for his fiancée. Carl and Allison then have a very special night. First attending Norm's Harry Potter party, Allison then makes him ride her scooter, and finally, they break into the Hollywood Bowl. They enjoy the view of the huge, beautiful theater, until he suddenly begins a rendition of Can't Buy Me Love, performing for the empty venue. She confesses she's never let anyone ride her scooter before, and he also shares how he's never done anything like that night with anyone. They then kiss passionately on the stage. While talking about her hobbies, Carl tries to cheer her up. Her band and her photography are not well known, but he thinks she doesn't need the fame. She knows she's not going to make it big. Not with her music, nor with her photographs. She just loves doing it. They are eventually interrupted by a security guy, whom they escape from while laughing. Carl arrives at work with a bag of oranges the next day, handing them to everyone lining up to ask for a loan from him. Norm lets him know a guy from corporate is there and wants to talk to him. Carl doesn't care about getting fired, he's optimistic about it. But Norm says he's a part of it too because he stood by and let it happen. The consequences seem to be catching up. They head to meet the vice president of the company. He informs Carl has given out extraordinary amounts of money for unreasonable loans. Just when it seems like he's in trouble, the VP says it's been actually good for the business. The debtors were so grateful to have their needs met. 98% of them are following through with payments, and it's made the bank a lot of money. He congratulates Carl and promotes him to a higher position, while Norm is ignored. Then we see a series of extraordinary, heartwarming moments. From Carl planning the bridal shower with Lucy, to him befriending a sad shopkeeper by speaking Korean to her. He also saves a man from by singing with him, and a crowd gathers below them. Carl arrives at the airport and runs into Stephanie again. Although this time, he's confident and doesn't care that much about the encounter. She's amazed by him, since she saw him on TV saving a man's life with a song. This is when we see the cracks in her current relationship. Carl is actually there to meet Allison since they're planning to go to a random place. He says goodbye to her, and we see her unhappy with her current boyfriend's pessimistic and cynical attitude. Carl sees Allison at the airport and carries her to the front desk. Neither of them have luggage. He asks for 2 tickets for whatever the next available flight is. They end up flying to Lincoln, Nebraska, and they have no idea what to do in town. They eventually go to a telephone museum and to a shooting range. They also end up attending a university football game. Carl's friends see him painted in red and white in the field while dressed as a corn husk. Somehow they also end up going to a chicken slaughterhouse. When they walk across the countryside, a storm forms. They then take shelter in a nearby barn. As rain falls, she confesses her love for him. Turns out, he's in love with her too. Suddenly, she suggests for them to live together. Carl clearly thinks it's not a good idea, and Allison notices, but he says yes regardless. Going back home, he's not in the ecstatic mood he's been in until now. When buying his tickets home, things go wrong. Upon seeing his name on the screen, the lady at the front desk calls security. The next thing he knows, Carl is asked by 2 men to join them. They bluntly ask him if he hates America. They think Carl is planning to attack the USA. Turns out they have been tracking him. They know he took a last-minute flight to an odd location, and that he's a member of PersianWifeFinder.com. Taking flying and Korean lessons and having been married only for 6 months seems very fishy. Finding out all of this, Allison is hurt, because he'd never told her he used to be married. They are then detained, so Carl calls his attorney and his best friend, Peter. He makes his case by explaining the root of all of Carl's decisions, which is not but a program called the Yes Man. Allison is baffled. She starts questioning the nature and the authenticity of their relationship, since he was forced to say yes to everything. He reassures her that he wanted to do everything they did together, and reminds her many things they did were his idea. However, she points out how he was hesitant to say yes when she asked him to live with her. At this point, she's not sure if his decision is based on his own will, or just because of a coercive ideology. Eventually, they are free to leave, and Allison goes out of the office without Carl. Carl goes back to his lonely apartment and the job he doesn't care about. Allison ignores his calls. Eventually, Carl manages to fly a plane by himself for the first time. He also attends Allison's gig. However, she ignores him, and only him. She tells everyone who she ignored to jump off a bridge. He follows her declaration and goes bungee jumping, which is an appropriate representation of his current life. While he's hanging upside down in the middle of the air, his phone rings. It's the bank's vice president. They are shutting down branches, and he needs Carl to fire people. Carl then interrupts Norm in the middle of his Spartan-themed party and breaks down. His phone is bombarded with notifications. One of his friends, Rooney, who's staying at Carl's apartment for free because Carl had to agree to it, reminds him specifically how he likes his laundry done. Peter also asks about Lucy's bridal shower, which Carl had completely forgotten about. Carl asks them to meet at the usual bar, where he greets with a downcast demeanor. He tells them he'll explain everything inside. A crowd greets them inside, screaming surprise. Carl hasn't failed Peter yet, because he's thrown his fiancée her bridal shower. All the people Carl met throughout the movie are there. He asks them favors to make the party happen in such a short time. Loan applicants, his neighbor, and his Persian ex-wife. We see Norm feeling down for the first time. But Carl introduces him to Sumai, the bridal shopkeeper who was sad about never finding love, and they hit it off wonderfully. Lucy has a great time, and Peter is grateful. Everyone around him is happy. But he's not, because he's still waiting for Allison to answer his calls. Carl arrives home, and the phone rings. It's Stephanie, his ex-wife, who asks him to go see her. She's had a big fight with her boyfriend. When they meet, she starts kissing him, and asks him to spend the night with her. He embraces her, but he says he can't with a firm no. He leaves the apartment, relieved. But as he gets into the elevator, the lights turn off and it stops. Fortunately, he makes it out hastily. Bad omens then keep showing up, a black cat, a tow truck taking his car, and he even starts hallucinating. We see Terrence, the creator of the program, leaving a hotel in his car. Carl jumps off the back seat and tells Terrence he needs to talk to him and not to freak out. Terrence freaks out, and they get into a car accident. Carl wakes up in a hospital bed and starts talking to Peter and Rooney about the promise. Peter insists it's nonsense. Carl is desperate, believing they don't understand him. But suddenly, a mysterious deep voice agrees. It's Terrence. He shows up injured, in a hospital gown. Carl asks him to free him from his promise. Terrence says there was never a promise or pact. He just made things up to persuade him, because Carl was being difficult. Still, he insists the program is actually real. Carl just doesn't know how to use it. The point is not to say yes to everything just recklessly. Maybe at first, to open up to opportunities, to people. But then, he's supposed to start saying yes, not because he has to, but because in his heart, he really wants to. Carl finally understands, and thanks him. He runs off in his hospital gown, ignoring the hospital staff's orders to stop. He runs into Lee, a nurse who had asked him for a loan for a Bugatti motorcycle, so he borrows it. It's too powerful for him, and he ends up riding it on one wheel, and almost crashing. Eventually, he gets the hang of the bike and drives as he can to meet Allison in time before her jogging photography class. As he gets off the bike and walks towards her, he says he's only there to tell her he doesn't want to live with her. Allison is unimpressed and leaves with her class. He jogs next to her. For the first time in the movie, we listen to Carl speaking honestly and vulnerably, admitting his insecurities and being clear about what he wants. Allison is reluctant to listen to him, but he insists he's being honest. And even though the program was strange, he found something very real in it. If he'd never done it, he would have never met her. The old Carl didn't think he was enough for anybody. He was scared that if he said yes to things and got involved with people, they would find sooner or later that he wasn't enough. He didn't think he had anything to give or to share, but he has realized he does. So he wants to share it with her. He talks about how she enjoys life and she's not scared of anything. Allison responds, insisting she's just a normal person who's scared of a lot of things. He proposes the idea of being scared, together. She doesn't know what to say, and he suggests for her to say yes, but only if she wants to. They get closer, and she finally responds with a maybe. This is good enough for Carl. They kiss, embracing each other and expressing their authentic feelings. With the city as a background, the class starts taking photographs of them.